Hi, my name is Martin Perhiniak. Welcome back to the Digital Art series here on PSD Tuts Plus. So far we covered lots of different topics and lots of different techniques, but today I would like to show you the top 10 techniques that you need to use or need to get used to if you want to do digital art with Photoshop. And on my list, I have those techniques and those tools that I use most of the time when I'm doing digital art. So let's get started with this list. First of all, I would like to make sure that you know it's the best to work together with Bridge whenever you work in Photoshop. Instead of using Finder or any file management applications, try to get used to working with Bridge because it makes it so much easier to open up and preview images. So I just clicked on the Bridge icon in Photoshop, but I show it to you again. This is the Bridge icon here, which opens up Bridge. And here you can browse on the whole computer and you can find any images or any files on your computer. And you can, if it's an image, you can easily preview it by just pressing space. And if you use the right and left arrows, you can quickly switch to the next one or the previous one in the folder. So that is a really clever and good way to work with images, and it makes it so much easier. And whenever you double click on an image or press enter, it will be opened up in Photoshop. The next thing, and obviously I don't have more time to spend on Bridge, but if you want to learn more about it, you can check out my basic series where I talk about Bridge in more detail. So in the basic series you will find 2 tutorials about Bridge. There is another, or we can go and proceed to the second tip or technique that I highly recommend to use in Photoshop with digital art, and that is the mixer brush tool. Now the mixer brush tool is similar to the brush tool, but it's mixing together colors that you already have on your image. So for example, if you want to smoothen something, or if you want to make a nice blend between colors, that is the perfect tool for you. On this painting, especially, I found it really useful to create all this fur detail. I used all the mixer brush tool for that. I even set up a keyboard shortcut for the mixer brush tool. I use N for the mixer brush tool, and you can do the same. If you want to customize your keyboard shortcuts, you can go to the edit keyboard shortcuts option, and here you just need to choose tools, because the mixer brush tool is a tool, and then you can find mixer brush under here, and as you can see I use N because it's just next to B, and I usually work with these 2 tools together, so I use B for brush and N for mixer brush. That's a fast way to switch between the 2. So once again, let's just see how it works. The way I like to work with the mixer brush tool is to turn off this option here on the top, which is called load the brush after each stroke. So let's just turn that off, and then set the preset to very wet. That's the way I like to work with it. If you have several layers, you can also choose to work with sample all layers or without. In this case, because I have only one layer, I just simply have sample all layers turned off. So, and even after that, you can still set the brush tip shape, what kind of brush tip shape you want. I'm going to use a soft edged brush, and I'm going to just simply draw over some details here. Now also, with the mixer brush tool, I like to set up under the brush panel, I like to set up the brush tip shape spacing to 1%. That makes the blend very smooth when you are using the mixer brush. So you can see the spacing, the higher it is, the less dots I place one after each other. But if I set it to 1%, that's the minimum value, then it will be really nice and smooth. So now if I start to create some smooth lines, you can see how easy it is to blend colors together. So for example, if I use some details from here, let me just zoom closer so you see what I'm doing. it really nicely blends some details together, and in this case it creates a really nice fur detail. Let me do it on another part where we don't have much detail. So here I'm doing the same thing, and I'm just drawing over it, and I'm creating these details. Okay, so you can see that is a really useful option, and you can also use it on hair. You can use it on so many things in Photoshop. It's a really universal tool, so I highly recommend this. You can also use it to blend details together. For example, if you want to soften some detail, like let's say here on the leg, you can just draw over some details and just blend the colors together a bit more to create something a bit closer blend between colors. It's not really a good example in this case, but I think you understand what I mean. For drapery, it's also great to draw drapery. Okay, so that was the second tool, mixer brush tool. The third one is obviously the brushes panel, which is something, it can be a really scary panel because it has so many options, but if you spend some time experimenting with it, then you will find it really helpful. If you want to learn more about it, please watch the tutorial. Actually, there are two tutorials in this series about the brushes. First of all, the brushes panel, and then how to create custom brushes. So I don't want to repeat myself, just please check those tutorials for details about this. The only thing I just want to mention here is that in the brush panel you can set up options and brush tip shapes for all the drawing tools. Tools which has a brush tip shape. So for example, the healing brush won't have options in the brush panel, but the brush tool, the mixer brush tool, they both share the same panel. Also, you can use the other tool, the history brush tool with the brush panel. Okay, and you can also use brushes or brush presets for the dodge and the burn tool. So these are also drawing tools. Okay, and you can even use them for the clone stamp tool, which is a really interesting, it can be a really interesting combination. Okay, so for example, I just select sample custom brush from here, and I'm going to use it for cloning. So I just alt clicked on the image, and now I can clone the texture, or with this texture of the brush, the face of the tiger or the head of the tiger. So that's an interesting combination there. So the brush panel is not only for the brush tool, it's for all the drawing tools in Photoshop. So that's good to know that. Okay, and also I just want to mention that as well, that if you find it difficult to keep track of all the brush tip shapes that you have in Photoshop, these are the brush tip shapes, then I really highly recommend to check out the preset manager panel or window, because under there, so I just clicked on that little arrow here on the top and then choose preset manager, but you can also go to edit and choose preset manager from here. So here you can see all your brushes, and you can easily select like lots of brushes together and delete them, or you can save them as a set. So that's really handy. And also it's not just for brushes, but the preset manager works with swatches, gradients, and so on and so forth. So I recommend to also check the preset manager out. And if you want to learn more about this, I also have a tutorial for this specific topic. That one is also in the basics series, which you can find here on PSD Tuts Plus. Okay, let's get to the next tip. That's the fourth one. It's creating snapshots whenever you save the document. I was referring to this option before, and I actually showed it, but because I always have a fast version of my tutorials, it's really hard to see what I'm doing, so I just want to show it to you now. It's in the history panel, because in the history panel you can see all your steps since you open the document. It records all your steps, but you can change the preference under Photoshop preferences and choose performance. And if you are working on Windows, you need to go to Edit, Preferences, Performance. And here under the history states, you can specify the steps needed that you need. So that means I have 100 steps recorded all the time, which I can always go back and undo or redo these steps. But even if this is not enough, you can always use snapshots. Now, you can create snapshots by clicking at the bottom of the history panel on this little camera icon. That will create a snapshot. So let's just say I invert the colors of this image. I press Command Y. It's just something very radical change. And then I create a snapshot, of that stage. So you can see that's now snapshot 1, but I can always go back to the open state of the image. So 1 and 2. And then if I want to, I can just select snapshot 1 and I can invert it back, and let's say use levels just to make the whole image a bit more higher contrast. Okay, something like that. Again, a completely different look. For that, I can again save a snapshot. So now I have 3 versions, and with the snapshots I can easily see all these 3 versions. And you can save lots or as many snapshots as you want. The only problem with them, or only disadvantage of using snapshots, is that once you close the document, they won't be saved together with the PSD file. So they only work while you are working on the image. Once you close it, the snapshots will be gone. Okay. You can obviously, if you want to, you can save these snapshots as images, so you can save them out. But the best way to work with them is purely just to use them as just to see the stages you went through. And what I found in Photoshop is that usually I forget to save snapshots at critical stages, but what I do is I always save the document at critical stages. What do I call a critical stage? Whenever you finish something or you get to a point when you are happy with something and you want to go to another part of the painting. So at these critical stages, I've got into the habit of saving my document. And that's what I really like in Photoshop, that you can click on this panel options under the history panel, choose history options, and here you can choose the options automatically create new snapshot when saving. That is a really useful option because it means whenever I save the document, it will automatically create a snapshot for me. So let's just try that out. I'm going to save this document now. I'll just save it as a PSD file. So I save it as a Photoshop file. And you will see as soon as I save it, it will save it also in the history panel as a snapshot. Now, this snapshot also shows the time I saved the document. That's also a really useful thing. So you can see how much time you spent on an image. It's also like a timer. It works like a timer and also shows the time spent between 2 saves. So that is a really useful way to work. Let's just say I draw something here quickly, okay, and then I save it again. You will see that now we have a new stage saved as a snapshot, and I can always go back and forth between these. Now, another really useful thing with the history panel is the history brush, which not many users work with, but I also recommend to use it. For example, if I want a specific area, let's just say I'm at this stage and I have this brush stroke here, but I would like to have all my changes on the image apart from this stroke. If I know that there is a snapshot saved here, which is just before that stage, I can go back onto that. Or if I just want to partially fall back onto that stage, I can click on this little box next to the snapshot to add a mark so choose that as a sample for the history brush, and then go back to the last stage where you were, and then choose the history brush tool and just simply draw over the parts you don't need. For example, I just want to get rid of this part, but I would like to keep that line. So it's possible to go back in a non-linear way in history, so keep some stuff from the last stage, but also gather some more relevant parts from previous stages with the history brush tool. So this tip, the fourth one, was about snapshots and the history panel and the history brush in general. So I really like to work with this, and my preference for history states is 100, but it's up to your computer and mainly your memory, the size of the memory in your computer. The next, I just go back to the first snapshot. Okay, the next tip is the fifth one, is the rotate view tool. Now that is a really handy tool again. Whenever you zoom in and out, by the way, zooming in and out is really easy. Just hold down Z and then click and drag right and left to zoom in and out. Whenever you want to fit the image to screen, just press Command 0, also a fast way. So again, Z, click and drag right and left to zoom in and out, and wherever you click, it will zoom into that area. Okay, so that's a very handy way to use the zoom tool. Now the option that you need for that is called scrubby zoom. It's here on the top. It's in CS5. They added this feature in CS5, the scrubby zoom. If that's turned off, I will be able to create rectangles, but if the scrubby zoom is turned on, it's a funny name, then you can zoom out by dragging to the left while holding down Z, and zoom in if you drag to the right, also while holding down Z. But you don't need two separate keyboard shortcuts for zooming in and out. That's the great thing. So it's also a tool to change your view, but it's not for zooming in and out, it's for rotating your view. This is the rotate view tool, which you can find here in the toolbar. That's the rotate view tool, and I use R, the keyboard shortcut for this. And whenever you press R, you can click and drag and rotate your view, and then you can work on the image in an angle that is easier for your hand to follow. So for example, if I need to draw something, a line here, instead of keeping it the original way, let's say I want to add a line somewhere here, okay? Instead of using this, a vertical line, or maybe that's not the best example to use. Let me just go back one step. Okay, so let's just say a line which is a bit more difficult to follow. For example, here there is a line which I would like to amend here on the right side. If I want to draw over that line, I would use the rotate view tool. Instead of trying to follow this, I'm going to rotate my view, holding down R, click and drag to rotate, and now it's much more comfortable to draw over these parts in the image. Once I'm done and I want to do it on the other side, I just again hold down R and turn it around. It's just like working with pencil and paper. Okay, so you can see that I help myself by always adjusting the view to the angle that is best for me. So holding down R and dragging is the best way to do it, because if you work with, for example, with the brush tool and you are drawing and then you hold it down R and drag, when you let go, it will switch back automatically to the brush tool, so it won't interrupt you in your work. And also, if you press escape, it will jump back to the original angle of the image. So that's also a really useful tip. Now, another thing which I usually do is to flip the whole image just to see how it looks from the other angle, And the great artists and painters, they also did the same thing, just to check the perspective and have a completely fresh look at the image. But they used mirrors, but we don't need to do that. We can just simply go to the image menu and choose image rotation, flip canvas horizontal. And it will show you your image from a completely new and different angle. And the more time you spend looking at your image, the more difficult it will be to spot some problems with the proportions, the composition, the perspective. And that is a really good way to make to help yourself and make the image look a bit fresh. And don't be afraid to work on the flipped version of the image, because that will help you to make it even better most of the time. So just flip the whole canvas, work a little bit on the image, then flip it back and continue working again. So it's just like saving and see the snapshots. Try to get used to this while you are working, and you will see it will really help you to improve your whole composition and your paintings. So flip layer or flip image. You can also flip a layer if you just want to use this option with one specific layer under the edit menu, and you can find it under transform, flip layer horizontally or vertically. But I prefer to use it on the whole canvas. And you can even set a keyboard shortcut for that if you use it a lot. Another option, and let me just go back now. Another option is which I prefer to use is the vanishing point filter. Now for the vanishing point filter, it's useful to create a new layer. Okay, so I just go to the layers panel and I create a new layer. Then go to the filter menu, choose vanishing point, and with the vanishing point you can create a grid to help yourself creating or setting up a perspective guidelines. Okay, so I'm on that new layer and I can set up a grid. Let's just say there's 1 point, 2 point, 3, and you need 4 points to define a plane. So there's a plane already. Okay, and I can see that all the lines will get to a vanishing point somewhere there on the right outside the canvas, and I can easily change the grid size here on the top. I can make these little squares bigger or smaller, adjusting it to the size that I need. And then I can also, once I'm happy with the ground plane, I can create the side planes as well. If I hold down Command and click on one of these points, I can create another plane, and I can even rotate this plane by holding down Alt and again clicking the middle point and just rotating it around like that. So let's just do this again here on the right. I click on the main plane, the ground plane. I held down Command or Control on PC to drag it out, and then Alt or Option to rotate that plane as well around. Now if I want to see this in Photoshop, I just need to click on this little additional options icon and choose return 3D layer, return or render grids to Photoshop. That's what you need to choose, and then you click on OK, and you will see that Photoshop will create these lines on a separate layer. So on this layer, it's quite hard to see, but if I duplicate the layer, you will see it better. So there are the lines, and if I turn off my image, you can see these guidelines are actually on a separate layer. Okay, so let me just undo these steps. So that's a quick and easy way to set up a vanishing point. The other great tool is to work with is the crop tool, and most users use the crop tool to cut some parts of the image. So for example, if I don't need that left part of the image, I want to make like a square format, I just select this part and then press enter, and I have a crop. But with the crop tool you can do lots of useful things. For example, I can select this part and crop it non-destructively if I have a normal layer. So you first need to double click on the background layer if you only have a background layer, then make the crop, and then also choose this option here on the top called hide, because that means you won't delete the part which you are going to get rid of. It's just temporarily hides it. But whenever you go to the image menu and you choose reveal all, it will automatically come back. So you won't lose anything with the crop tool. That's called non-destructive cropping. And another great thing with the crop tool is that you can use it to change your canvas size. So adding to your canvas, not just removing, you can also add. So let's just say I want to make this image a bit more panoramic, so wider. I can easily drag these outside. Once I select the whole image with the crop tool, then I can drag them out. And you can see we even have the rule of thirds in CS5, which is great. So for example, I have her now on one of the thirds here, so I can see she's now not in the third, but now she is on one of the thirds, which is great for composition. And then I press enter, and now my canvas will be set to this size. So instead of going to the image menu and choose canvas size, you can always use the crop tool to change your canvas. Okay, and we have 2 more tools or tips that I want to cover in this tutorial. The next one is the pen tool for drawing and making selections. Even though for digital art mainly we work with brushes, the pen tool is still a really useful tool, because with that you can easily create some specific selections or even drawings. Let's just say in the background I want to add some more mountains. So for that I would use the pen tool. I just selected the pen tool, and with the pen tool I can easily create some shapes like these quickly. Okay, and I can even fill this in with the brush tool. If I turn this into a selection, let me just quickly draw over this area here. So if I turn this into a selection, for that I just need to press Command or Control Enter or Return, and then just simply say Edit, Fill, and choose a color here. Or first of all choose a color. Let me just use the brush tool and I pick a color from the mountain, and then press Alt Backspace. That's fill in with the foreground color option. Okay, so that's a fast way to draw some straight or curved lines and then fill it in with a color. So pen tool, making selections or drawing, it can be used for lots of different things. You can even draw vector shapes with it. Even though we are in Photoshop, you can work like being in Illustrator. And then last but not least, the color picker and the brush tool shortcuts, and they are really useful as well. I mentioned these keyboard shortcuts before, but it's always good to remember them. So first of all, if you have the brush tool, you can quickly select colors with the hot color picker option. The keyboard shortcut is Control Alt Command, so the 3 together, and then click. And here you can select the hue from the wheel and then a brightness and saturation from the rectangle inside. Okay, once you pressed Control Alt Command and you clicked, you don't need to hold down the keyboard shortcuts anymore. You just need to hold down the mouse, select the color, and then paint. Another shortcut is Control Alt click and drag right and left to change the size of the brush, and drag up and down to change the hardness of the brush. That's the same option on PC is going to be right click. So Control Alt right click. The hot color picker option is, I think, Alt Shift right click, but I'm not really sure on that because I haven't been using a PC for years. So please try to find that keyboard shortcut. And just check Alt Shift right click. I think that's the one. But for Mac it's definitely Control Alt Command click and then choose a color. Okay, So these are also really useful, but just as a bonus, I would like to show you a couple of more keyboard shortcuts. The square bracket keys can be also used to step and make your brush bigger or smaller, so the square bracket keys. And you can also use the dot and the comma keyboard shortcuts to switch between the brush tip shapes you have in your brush library. So for example, here on the top left you can see I'm switching between the brushes that I have in my brush library. That's also a really useful way to work. And that's all what I wanted to show you. So the top 10, once again: using Bridge, Mixer Brush Tool, Brushes Panel and Preset Manager, Snapshots, Rotate View Tool, Flip image horizontally or vertically, Vanishing Point Filter for the guides, vanishing lines, Crop Tool, Pen Tool, and the keyboard shortcuts for color picking and to change your brush. So that's all for today, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you learned some useful tricks and techniques. And in the following 2 tutorials, I'm going to show you an image, a painting, divided into 2 tutorials. It is going to be a building concept. We are going to paint a castle, and we are going to use a photograph as the background, just to help us see the whole scenery, but the emphasis is going to be on the castle itself. So I hope you enjoyed today, and I hope you will join me next time as well. Thanks a lot for your attention.